As we welcome a new year, I want to take a moment to pause and reflect. A new year brings perspective, it brings clarity, and it allows us to reset how we lead, work, and prepare for what's next. As we step into 2026, the expectations of leadership and HR will only grow stronger. Leaders and organizations will look to HR not just for solutions, but for foresight. HR will look to leadership for clarity of strategy and establish a partnership to drive organizational health through people. AI will continue to reshape work. Leadership alignment will become non-negotiable. HR's ability to think strategically will define organizational success. So as you finalize your plans for the year ahead, I'll leave you with one question. How prepared is your HR and your senior leadership team for what lies ahead? Through our flagship program, the HRBP MBA Masterclass, the Symphonic C-Suite Leadership Development Program, and our Future Leaders Development Program, we help leaders and executives move beyond operational excellence into strategic impact. We invite you to connect with us at Strategy Focus Group as you shape your 2026 roadmap. Thank you for your trust and thank you for your commitment to the advancement of the future of work. Happy New Year, and we look forward to working with you in 2026. Good morning, good evening, depending upon what part of the world you're in. If it's Friday, it is the CEO series, and I'm honored today to have as our guest Rob Veersma, an international learning expert with multiple years of experience in global executive development, senior leadership roles at Shell International and Gazprom International, where he shaped leadership capabilities at the highest levels worldwide. And with that, welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much, Ron, for having me on the show of today.
I'm glad to have you. Last time we were together was in Amsterdam. I think it was last year. So good to see you again. Good to see you again. Well, you know, we always start our show with asking our guests to kind of walk us through their journey from university to head of leadership development or whatever it is at the top of the pinnacle. Give us kind of a short version of that.
Okay, Ron, thanks. So let me start first, because a lot of people think I look much more younger than people would like suggest or accept. But I worked 40 years in learning and development. And I started in learning and development after I graduated from university in Groningen. And over the years, I created academies in the different companies I was working. And I was working in Dutch, Anglo-Dutch and a Russian company. I was traveling the world from Oman to Nigeria, vice versa, Canada, etc. And importantly, Ron, and I think that's on top of all the experience working with a lot of different cultures all around the world. So yes, when I started in university, previously to university, I went to, you can call it a class or school for becoming an elementary teacher. So in fact, I'm also an elementary teacher on that school. And I enjoyed that time with kids. And I will tell you a couple of examples later on. But in that time, and we're talking about the 80s, there was a huge unemployment in the Netherlands. So I started to pick up my study in pedagogics. And I graduated with 3 master titles. Because at that time, corporate business training was something completely new, at least in the Netherlands in the 80s. And we started with it, and it was new science. It was a new area, and I really enjoyed it. And after that, Ron, first job, second job, third job. The last 25 years, it was a huge corporate experience. But I also have been a trainer for a couple of years in influencing programs, and recently spoke with colleagues of that company again, and that was probably in building character, probably the most impactful period, because then exactly when influence matters, when it really works, etc. So yes, 40 years, Ron, a lot of experience, a lot of people I've met. a lot of challenges I've had. And I mentioned it already in our pre-conversation, if you go through your life, even on a laptop, and you're checking your documents, you're noticing there are thousands of documents and presentations and spreadsheets. And that's so amazing that the productivity was in 40 years pretty high.
Yeah. It's amazing. I did the same thing yesterday. I was looking for something, and I'm going back to 2000. I'm like, whoa, all this stuff. But again, was what we've gone through over a period of time. So when you talk about your journey and how you ended up where you are at this particular point, what are you most proud of?
I would. Now that's difficult to say. There's something particular I can think of being proud. I'm proud of the career I've had, the 40 years. But probably the most proud of I'm on, that I was able in programs as a trainer, as a teacher, as a individual to spark people, to give insight to them. And very often I have to say it was sometimes unintended, because even as I was intending to give the spark, it didn't land. It sparks when it is unexpected. I'll give you a couple of examples. I already mentioned I was a teacher in elementary school before I went to university. And I was having a good story, an interesting story. And all the kids of 6 years, 7 years old, they were listening to me. But then the garbage truck went by. And all the kids were in front of the window. And they don't listen to me because the garbage truck is much more interesting. And in our early years, I was also giving some training programs to people who want to become a teacher. And I gave didactics. And I said, well, 3 things important. 3 things you need to remember. And I reminded them 3 things important, 3 things important. And on the evaluation forms, I asked them, what did you learn? And they learned something completely different than the 3 things. and also in Shell, I need to tell you this because it is the memory of good experience. We were testing out a new program in Beijing at that time. It was called Mid-Level Leadership Program. So it's for the mid-level people in Shell. And it was a week-time program. We tested all type of different exercises, stuff, etc. And there was one lady from Australia. And she was actually, I would say, bored because she was reading a novel in the classroom. And so I asked her the last night and said, well, you were reading a book. Is it not interesting? She said, no, it's not interesting. You need to understand what my position is in business and the challenge we're facing and blah, 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 that type of stuff. And I said, yeah, well, I cannot help it. And so we had a good conversation that night. On the evaluation form, the next day, she said, it was an epiphany. And I said, what was the epiphany? She said, the conversation. So 5-day course and the conversation in the end.
At the back end.
Gave the spark.
What was the learning point from that? So if you take that step and go to the next session, 5-day session, did you change anything?
I was in a part of designing. So what we changed is that conversation. So, having the conversation amongst each other is actually vital. And you don't need to understand as a trainer or teacher what they are talking about. It's more like inspire each other, listen to the stories people have to tell. They have a lot of stories to tell and the challenges they are sharing. So mid-level leaders, they have a lot of stories to tell because that's a very challenging job because they are actually with the feet on the ground and in the mud.
Okay. So let's flip that and look back at your career and say, what are you less proud of? If there was anything that you could mention or feel like talking about that you had gone through, that if you had to probably go through it again, you would change it. Was there a less proud moment?
And I'm not also in this, you can say over 40 years, there was a lot of experience.
Yeah.
And you make mistakes.
Okay.
And you make mistakes in, leading, making mistakes with dealing with people, stakeholder management is poor or whatever. I remember poor stakeholder management in one of my companies, and my boss came to me and said, that was not clever. Is that not so proud of? I would say I learned about it. So I think it's about learning.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people ask me, what is then leadership about? And say, well, leadership is about scratches. You need to suffer the scratches, because it's not easy leadership. You're dealing with people and not everybody is happy with you or us or whatever. And it gives you scratches on your soul, it gives you scratches on your face, and sometimes you have the tears in your eyes. And leaders who are saying to me, well, I don't have scratches and I don't have tears in my eyes, and I would say, something wrong over there.
Okay. So as you were going through all of this transformation over those multiple years, I'll say multiple years as opposed to numbers, who played a critical role? Who was mentoring you? Who was your sounding board to just to listen?
Now, also in here, it's difficult to say. What I consider is highly important in life, and I would say for a lot of people maybe should be, is role modeling. So there are a lot of role models in my life, and some of them negative role models. And that's a negative, not a negative in a way like I shouldn't do it that way, but more like I can do it better. I remember when in one of my first roles as a learning advisor, and I was dealing with the first time, I observed. It's about observation, and I observed leaders, and I was thinking, are they really? Is it true what they're saying? Is that so? Negative role models. It's like, no, that's wrong, and I can do it better. So that's negative.
Mm-hmm.
On the positive side, I need to tell you one person because I admire him, and I will come back to about him later on. And that's a guy called Hugh Mitchell in Shell. He was the chief HRO. He was a tough leader. He was Scottish tough, crystal clear. And as a role model, why is he a role model for me? Because he was demonstrating leadership. I give you the example. I was dealing with onboarding. That was experience hire onboarding. So people who joined Shell from a site. I had a program which called the Fireside Chat, where they can talk with senior leaders.
Oh, okay.
Very interesting. And there was one guy in HR who was invited to be at that time the Fireside Chat guy. And he called me that afternoon and he said, I cannot join because I'm stuck in traffic, blah, 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 etc. You need to find somebody else. And I said, no, it's your problem. It's not my problem. You quitting is not my problem. Your problem. So he said, okay. And he was in a meeting at that time with all the executives, HR president, so executive vice president. So we're talking about big level guys, including Hugh Mitchell. That was the chair. I didn't know of any replacement. Who turned up? Hugh Mitchell. Imagine the chief HRO of Shell, huge company, busy agenda, whatever, and he turned up. So I asked him, why are you turning up? And he said, well, somebody needs to do it, Rob. Tough cookie, great guy. And for those who are from Shell and know him, listeners or viewers, I know for sure some will not agree with me that he is a role model because they will consider him as a brutal force, etc. Yeah. But that's the perspective. Everybody has a different perspective.
Yeah. Well, that was his MO. So it wasn't like he was a bad CHR or a bad leader, but that was just his MO, and that's what he gave out. And you accepted that. So let me ask you this then. So as you've gone through all of that, how did all of those learnings reshape your leadership profile and the way that you lead people? Because you've led multiple teams across your career. How did that shape you as a leader?
Over the years, Ron, over the last 10, 15 years, I became more and more aware of being a role model myself, leading by example. I would say, if I look now at what I'm doing, for instance, I'm mentoring and coach to some students. Probably there, some of them are online at the moment, which is, for me, very inspirational, for them as well. I'm a kind of a keynote speaker for them. Yeah. These are students which are committed to energy transition, and we're just starting a new series with them. We had 4,000 applicants, 100 are selected, and they come from all around the world. And I'm telling them also about leadership, personal leadership, and my example. So that's, I would say, I've learned myself over the years to be a role model and example myself.
Yeah. Interesting background, because when I keep going back and thinking, you started out as an elementary school teacher, and then you ended up in corporate, not the normal,
director.
Not the normal process, and a global leader.
Yeah.
Was there learnings from developing kids, elementary school, that you were able to take away? Because that's probably a little more difficult audience, because how do you keep them engaged? And I'm thinking, I've never been a school teacher, but what was the learnings from the elementary school was kind of an anchor that you carried with you as you built your career?
Well, think about the garbage truck. You can draw attention all the time.
Yeah.
You can inspire people, but you cannot teach them. They learn themselves. So over the years, my challenge was to conduct a learning space, learning environment, or an academy where people they really like to join, to do it, to gather the information. And I am also coming back to, ROI of learning. We also understand that we will not be able to attract 100% of the audience.
Yeah.
It is, there's only 25% will adopt immediately. They have the spark, they see it. 25% they turn off immediately. They say, that's not for me. Yeah. And there is in the middle 50% saying, yeah, might be, no. So what to do with the 50%? That's a challenge.
I sat in to order a session. I won't say where. And the trainer was going through the motions, very excited and going through it. And as I glanced around the room, everybody was on their phone. And I thought to myself, how do you pull everybody back in, because everybody was on their phone, and that's kind of the same as the garbage truck that was coming by.
Oh yeah. How
do you re-engage that for trainers that are out that are listening in? And we've all had those moments. It seems like you've lost the room. It could be just temporarily. How could we have our moment and reconnect again? The garbage truck concept. I love it.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to tell you something a little bit about, maybe my observations over the years about what different types of leaders I've seen. I have three types of leaders. There are Boquitos, there are Geronimos, and there are ostriches.
Okay, you got to walk me through that.
Okay. Boquito is the name of a gorilla, a famous gorilla in the Netherlands, because once he escaped from the zoo in Rotterdam. So therefore, famous gorilla. But a gorilla is a very important type of creature, because a gorilla is alpha. Is telling you, my wish, my command, you need to follow me. We have sufficient examples at the moment in the world. Geronimo was an Indian leader, very famous guy, but his leadership style was totally different. He said, you want me to become your leader? Okay, but then you need to follow me. and they followed him voluntary, not, by force. He was a leader by nature, by character, authority. And the ostriches, I can see the ostriches as a type of leadership style which has actually developed over the last 20 years.
Okay.
And what kind of leadership is that? That's the leader who don't want to tell. They don't want to say, this is it.
Yeah.
They don't want to say, you're on your phone again? Out. Go away.
Okay.
We had at that time in the commercial academy in Shell, guys that were, some of them perceived themselves as highly important.
Big shots.
Because, deal making, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And they were on the Blackberries at that time.
Okay.
And there was one guy all the time on his BlackBerry and walking out, etc. And so I went to him and I said, well, you have two choices, by the way. You can pay attention, or you are allowed to visit Hugh Mitchell. Yeah, because I already knew Hugh Mitchell's answer to that. He would. So because I didn't have the stripes and stars at that time to say, hey,
Yeah.
That is a board member who could say, and now you stop. You're not that important. You need to learn, become better. So coming back to the 3 types of leaders, nobody wants to become a boquito, for sure. Because that's a little bit too harsh. And there are bad examples. On the other hand, depends on, the state of business you're in. Maybe you have a startup business, then you need to have boquitos to start with business. Or Geronimos, which are, Geronimo was not a friendly guy. Geronimo was very clear about his goals. He wants to beat the enemy with his warriors. But the warriors were following him because they accepted him immediately, naturally, as their leader. And his wish was also the command. But ostriches, they would say, well, let's check it again. There's a sound at the moment. Yep. Let's check it again. And they don't want to confront people sufficiently. So coming back to your example, kids in school, you can say, stop it. It's possible. If they do it too much with too much of these cars, the trucks running by.
And the garbage truck.
And then they all the time in front of the window. So one moment you need to say to the kids, stop. Pay attention. And I learned during my training time, when I was a trainer in, behavioral influencing behaviors, that starting addressing the things you want them to do is starting with the word I and the word you. I want you to sit down.
Okay.
That's crystal clear, isn't it?
Very direct.
And very direct.
Very direct.
But coming back to that point, direct. Are there a sufficient leader who wants to dare to be direct at the moment? I would say more and more leaders need to step up and becoming kind of a Geronimo.
Okay.
Being crystal clear.
Okay.
Telling direction, what to do.
That there's 2 things I wanted to mention, as it relate to that. The 3 types of leaders. That's an article. That could be a book. Okay.
I know.
Yeah. So that's just giving you a little nudge there, because there's a lot of deepness that goes through each one of those particular clarity, those particular situations. The other point I wanted to make was clarity, because I've been reading a lot lately about leadership and clarity. You give directions in a room, you talk about strategy or whatever it is, and everybody walks out, nods their head. But what's the interpretation of each person? Because what you may be perceived as clarity, they're not perceiving that. It's clouded from their end, and maybe the safety is not in the room to say, can you explain that a little deeper? Because I don't understand
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And run to that to point, because I didn't prepare this example, but But I had a lot of experience here also in Shell. At one moment in Shell, we were dealing with virtual leadership. Maybe when we were in Doha, I gave a presentation about virtual leadership at that time. I'm not sure anymore. But virtual leadership is quite important and became more important in the Corona period, because then people are much more, stuck to, their homes. But
your thought process was ahead of its time.
no, well, we had a program. We were running the examples. We had a lot of stuff. And by the way, a lot of people in Shell at that time were not very interested either, because hey, we were doing business like we were doing all the time. But you need to be conscious. So we came to to a program. We tested it, etc. But there's one exercise I need to tell you, because that was so fantastic. It's called colorblind. And colorblind, I think it was originally developed for air traffic control. Because air traffic control needs to be very crystal clear about the communication, about, what kind of a plane is coming. Well, it's a blue one. No, which blue one? No, it's the light blue. No, come on. So colorblind is an exercise where people are blindfolded. And when people are blindfolded, their communication channels immediately turns off. Imagine, it is great to see. So I put 10 people around the table, colorblinds. By the way, I need to tell you this one because it's so funny. So one day we were in London playing this game as well, and the colorblinds were gone. So somebody went out to find the colorblinds, but in the kind of a red light district of London, they only had fluffy colorblinds, with all kind of in pink type of stuff. So everybody was sitting around it. Very fun. Anyway, but what they need to do an exercise, and actually they need to find the solutions together based on language. So they need to identify, missing colors and missing shapes. And they have attributes in their hands. They need to identify what it is. So somebody is saying, well, I have something which feels like there's a triangle. And the other one is saying, well, I have something which feels like, I don't know. And the other one is describing, this feels like an elephant. The other one is describing, hey, this feels like. And it is about the crystal clear communication about what do you see and how do you communicate. That exercise is highly important for also face-to-face teams, but in this time for this occasion for virtual teams. Because what we identified is, even when we were asking teams at that time, what is the goal of your team? And they had to fill it in on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Silent. And they had 10 different goals. So I said, so much for team effectiveness. And come on, you need to do something about it.
Yeah.
So we identified at that time, we created a program where, all kind of agreements needs to be upfront, crystal clear for teams, specifically when they are dealing with, when they are abroad. And in the industry, oil industry, it's even more important because you need to have a clear understanding about what you're saying to each other. Otherwise, it will be dangerous. Difficult to say when you're on a drilling platform and say, well, we have a pipe over here. How does the pipe looks like? Well, it feels a little bit warm. How warm?
Okay.
Oh, that's the red one. Don't care. Things like that. Clear.
Yeah. So did you build a program around clarity? And the reason I ask that, because that's really, really being discussed today in the leadership so-called vertical about clarity of communication. We go with buzzwords, but you have 10 different people. That could be 10 different interpretations.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we built a program around it, but that was for the purpose of virtual teams. But, you can translate it to co-located teams as well. It's no problem. Yeah.
So
tons
if you
of materials run, tons of materials still here.
I know. You said back that laptop, right? But back to 2000. Yeah. So if you, I'm going to put you in a scenario. You were talking to the newer leaders coming in, maybe N-1 or 2. What advice would you give them on managing teams as it relates to clarity? We say strategy. What advice would you give them?
So actually, that comes from the learning I had over the years as well. So remember when I was teaching the kids and they were running to the window, or remember that I was teaching didactics and that people saying, well, I learned something different. So apparently people have, they make different interpretations. They think differently. They're different wired, and specifically run when they are from different cultures. They have a total different understanding.
Yeah.
So you need to check and check and check over again. HSE, maybe you know the term, health, safety, and environment, which is in a lot of companies highly, highly important. In some cultures, the end of the process, so the end of the definition process about what safety is, in some cultures, that's the beginning of a discussion. In some other cultures, it's the start of the discussion. The end of the discussion. So, for instance, in this country, in the Netherlands, it's the end of the discussion. Clear. Cursor clear.
That's it.
That's it. In some other cultures, not at all. So you need to do, as leader, checking it over again and sit down with your team again and ask them, what do you think is the goal? Before they actually do anything. And, spend a little bit of time, create a day on the beach with them and sit down and have that type of conversations about, do you know what your role is? Do you know what you need to do? Do you know what our goal is? Do you know our stakeholders, by the way? It's also highly important. Yeah.
Wow. I love that. I took a lot of notes there just so you'll know that.
You're writing the book, Ron.
No. You're writing the book. So I want to ask you this. How do you stay relevant? With all you've gone through, lots of times people reach the pinnacle that you are and they said, I'm pretty much done and I'm just going to kind of coast on through. How do you stay in the game of development? How do you stay in the game of learning? I know you didn't turn the switch off yet. So what does Rob do to stay relevant?
Well, I think firstly, you need to say, and I mentioned it already in our pre-conversations, staying in contact with my previous colleagues all around. So it's my Russian colleagues, is it my Shell colleagues, is it my colleagues, for different period of time. That I think that's about relevance. It's about, for instance, Shell HR colleagues, we see each other twice a year, some of them. So we only invite nice people. That's the definition, only nice.
Yeah.
In
quotes.
Yeah, exactly. And then we invite people and we having a conversation about, any relevant topic, what people, we are invited by a host in the company and they say, okay, tell me a little bit more about it. So that's one. Secondly, I'm when nice people ask me, can you help me to reevaluate my program or think about this or that? I would say, yeah, I'd love to. And I do it for free, only for coffee and lunch, because it's nice to do.
Yeah.
The third group I need to mention to stay relevant is students. My guess is that some of them are now online as well. These are fantastic new leaders of the future. So inspiring the leaders of the future. Yeah. Inspiring, for instance, I know this guy is online. He is an Egyptian guy living in St. Petersburg. His name is Dia Bihari. But I also know that Netzanet is online and she is from Ethiopia. These are the leaders because these are engineers. They're dealing with energy transition. So they have a huge challenge for the future. So if I can inspire them, and that's the feedback I'm receiving from them, that makes me relevant. And then lastly, Ron, I'm still going to school. I'm going to university classes.
Really?
Yeah, for the fun. And it's about geopolitics, or it is about history. It's about that type of stuff I love.
Wow.
Economics. Yeah.
That's amazing. I admire that dedication. I'll do a webinar that's something I'm interested in. I'll choose a topic. And it's funny, I signed up for a topic the other day. And the lady said, would you need more information? I said, no, I'm just ordering. I'm just interested in the topic. You can't try and sell me. I just want to learn more about it. But I'm really impressed that you would take the time. Go ahead.
Yeah, but also so that's the same for you, because we are two guys with a certain experience.
Yeah.
And that and experience over years, you can share with other people. And what I noticed is, and that's very inspirational, that these young leaders, they take it up.
Mm-hmm.
They take it up, and that's also very important to coach them and mentoring. I introduce you to Alisa. She's in Dubai with you, and I admire her because encouragement is about courage.
Mm-hmm.
So she went out on her own from the Netherlands to Dubai to live there and to find a job in HR, and she did. She's now starting in her second, or she started in her second role at the moment. So it's about that encouragement to see that young people really make it. I think that's inspirational. Lastly, I like to mention something else, because then you notice that sometimes you make the difference in small parts. During Corona, my business was totally closed. Gazprom, totally closed, nothing. Same.
Yeah.
So one day I was under the shower, which is the area where I have the best ideas. And I thought, let's do a podcast. It's nothing new, but let's do a podcast. And I started a podcast twice a week.
Really?
Yes. I've done hundreds of them. One moment in Zoom, I created a new account for 500. The biggest number I had once was 470 attendees. 470. And I did topics, 1 hour on negotiation skills, 1 hour on influencing skills, 1 hour on leadership, 1 hour on whatever. And I had guests as well. One moment, a Russian guy, came back with feedback. And it chilled me, because he said in Russian, because he was writing it in Russian, and he said, it's amazing to be on this podcast, because I'm connected to the world. I'm here in Siberia, disconnected from the world in deep snow. This means I'm relevant, and I can listen to the international things happening around me. Can you imagine, Ron? It's chilled me, because if that the purpose is of these hundreds of webinars, webinars of the hundreds of webinars, and I reached only one person who made, then it's okay, isn't it?
That's amazing. And sometimes that you still remember that from long time ago. That you have these instances in life, and it may be a small thing at that time, but it's an anchor, and it still keeps coming back to moments like that.
Yeah. And to be honest, Ron, I think we can have even longer conversations than now 1 hour, because every memory creates the new memory. And I don't want to be on memory lane only, because that's boring. But stimulating people and talking about new ways of leader and inspiring people to becoming Geronimos, that will be great.
So as you look back on your life, let me rephrase that. As you look back on your career,
okay, I'm done.
Right now, as you look back on your career, what advice would you give to your younger self? You're that elementary school teacher, first day in school, and maybe you're trying to is this what I really want to do? What advice would you give to your younger self? If there was any.
I think, and it's difficult to say the younger self, of course, because I think the first 10 years of my career is the younger self part. And then there is so much to learn. And what I would have advised myself, probably if I could, is to pay attention to stakeholder management. So pay more attention to your environment, the people around you. And also it's about management. So it's not about coincidences, but manage it. I very often mention it also to young people. If you walk in a building, in a corporate building, and you need to go from A to B, never do so. Always go to B through C. Take another corridor and you find out who's there.
Wow.
The other thing is, I call it self-awareness. I was young and I was, very ambitious. But the self-awareness is that I thought in the beginning that I could do everything, that I was brilliant, and I was, of course,
Yeah.
becoming famous and millionaire and stuff. But self-awareness is about consciousness about who you are, what you want to be, what is your strength, what is your weakness. Of course, this wisdom came later, partly, of course. But I would have loved the idea to have a better understanding about leaders, to classify leaders at the beginning, having an understanding. And that maybe I would give myself that advice. But it is probably more about the awareness, self-awareness.
Okay. You mentioned stakeholder management and self-awareness. That's one of the key topics today in leadership development. I do a lot of executive coaching, and that comes back in a lot of feedback and understanding that kind of approach. My father always told me, always read the room.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Who's yapping, or who's sitting there quiet, contemplating.
Yeah.
Because it's a different connectivity to each one of those. My father was not educated, but that still rings with me today. And I go into a room, I go into a meeting, I'm listening, but I'm reading who's got the juice, who doesn't have the juice, who's going like this.
And it brings me immediately to the key point in my career was this trainer experience, where I was I learned so much about how to influence people, and that's about reading the room. That's about reading the characters. It's about reading stakeholders. And it's also about, we called it in the elementary school environment, we called it sociogram. So we had to draw people in a circle. Where are they? How are they connected? How do we influence each other? So that's a kind of an observation. How do people interact? And it's so highly important to understand who is important, who is influencing you, who are you influencing, etc. Ron, question to you. If this is becoming more and more important, should we stop with leadership development programs and do something else on coaching?
I think leadership development programs are kind of an overall approach. I don't think that's going to be viable moving forward. I think executive coaching is more of a diagnostic approach, because if it's like kids in the room, you got all the kids in the room, and you think what you're talking about is connecting to them, and they're on to something else. Well, each individual is different. And but again, it depends on budget, because if you're trying to develop leaders, that needs to be that mentor, that coach approach to do that kind of thing, because the overall having 10 or 15 people in the room, that may work for a younger level of leaders just starting out, about the importance of leadership. But once you get at a certain level, that's going to, my thought is, more individualized. Your thoughts?
Yeah, similar thoughts. It's about, no generic leadership development programs anymore. What brings me to another point is that I've done some, in my presentations, actually, I present this, is that can you develop leaders, or are you existing already as a leader? So coming back to that Geronimo type, the authority he had. So it's about authority. Can you develop authority? So I would say, could we skip the language about leadership development and start with authority development?
Okay.
And that brings me to another point, is that they have it already. They have the authority. Some don't have it at all, and they should be avoided to go in that area anyway. Coming back to that list of 25, 50, 25. So some of them have it, some don't have it, and some can be developed in a certain direction. But I think it's about the word authority. And it also brings me to another word, because I was recently on a lecture by a professor, and she was talking about the situation in the world and the leadership styles. It's also about leadership styles. And she had a very good observation. She said, maybe we should, go back to the classical old virtues. It's not about the dominance of, some leaders in the world. They think that brutal force will create something. No, let's go back to ourselves and be prudent, find justice, temperance, courage. Courage, quite an important word. Courage also to say, stop it, this is it.
Yeah.
Integrity, hope, charity. The key words of leaders. So can we have programs where we can educate leaders to become that type of leaders instead of the classical ways of leaders?
Yeah.
And Ron, coming back to something else, I'd like to remind us. And I'd give you an example because this is storytelling, isn't it? So this is the story. In one of my companies, I developed a program at that time, kind of an academy, but it never happened because then I left the organization to go for Shell. I developed an academy of the past and an academy of the future. I made a picture of it. It was a very nice castle building with one door. And when you go to the left in the corridor, you ended up in a room with a professor with a huge amount of books and a fireside. And the people coming into the room and saying, "Professor, can you teach us from the past?" Because everything in the books is from the past.
Yes.
Ron, remember the book, Excellent Organizations. Yeah, when was it written? I think it was written in 1990. Excellent Organizations was a fantastic book.
Yeah.
I think only one company out of 20 still exists. The rest is all gone, totally gone.
30 plus years ago.
Yeah. So what is actually then the story of the past? No, it doesn't predict so much. Okay, let's go to the right. There is a room where the learning of the future. So let's imagine something. I imagined at that time something for that company. There was a room not with books, nothing, white walls, 2 round tables, one round table in the middle and a round table on the side. And the round table on the side, there were the participants, all these executive guys. And in the middle, there was a table with people who we picked up from the street. Just average people, policemen, priest, housewife, things. And the executives are sitting around. And then we're starting a Socratic conversation. We're asking the people in the middle, what do you think about blah, 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 leadership? What do you think about our business? And you can see these guys on the side immediately reacting like they don't know anything about it. Now, that's exactly the insight.
Yes.
That's it. And challenging them. Within Shell, we did occasionally the same. We had rooms where we had maps on the wall upside down. You can order them, by the way, upside down maps of the world. And people came into the room and said, that map is wrong. No, it's okay. Or we had a map with Russia in the middle. And then people said, that map is wrong. No. And challenging them to learn in a new direction. I think that would be the challenge for leader development.
Yeah.
Sorry for taking wrong.
No, I'm saying you have really given us a master class today, and I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. Absolutely amazing to see you again as well, but to the learnings that you've dropped on us today. So thank you for being a guest on the show. As we begin the process of closing out, is the last word you'd like to say to the audience? A couple of words.
Yeah. No, also to yourself, it sounds that I'm passionate about things to do, still is.
Yeah.
But Ron, I'm also enjoying I call it small happiness. And so no big business, no big travels anymore. So I travel the world. I'm not traveling anymore. I'm having a walk with my dog, Coco.
Yeah.
And I'm enjoying the time with my wife, Gita. So I'm enjoying time with friends or enjoying time with the last time we met, having a coffee.
Yeah.
Things like that. And my last thoughts for the audience is think about Geronimo. And do you want to be a leader people want to follow.
Yeah.
Okay, be clear and be demanding. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it.
Cool.
That's it.
Hang on as we begin to close out. To everyone that joined us today, thank you for listening. Your time and curiosity keeps these conversations alive. We'll be back next Friday with another journey, because behind every title is a story worth telling. And Rob brought that to us today, and every story brings us closer to what leadership really means. So we want you to like, comment, and share so that we can grow our global audience. So thank you so much. I need you to hang on for just 1 second. Thank you.
Take the CEO series with you anywhere, anytime. All episodes are now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and major streaming platforms. It's not just an interview. It's a masterclass in leadership.